Well, hello, everyone. Happy Sunday. Welcome to Effed Up News of the Week for October 3rd, 2021. Effed Up News of the Week is a little show that I do pretty much every Sunday just to go over some of the more, well, shall we say, interesting news stories from the past week that I may or may not have gotten a chance to cover already on the channel. We've got some good stuff coming up this week. We've got some vaccine, we've got some critical race theory, we've got all sorts of good stuff going on. But before we get into that, please remember that Effed Up News of the Week is brought to you by my locals community. I actually take suggestions from my locals community of any stories that they would like to see covered as part of the show. You can join my locals by going to kb.locals.com. You can actually join for free. You don't need to pay any money. This is just if you want to go the extra mile, but you can actually join for free at kb.locals.com. And I make sure that I have a way to communicate with you if I'm not on social media because I get banned or censored or something like that. But if you really want to support the work I'm doing, you can do so by going to kb.locals.com/support, donating for $5 a month, $50 a year, or making a one-time gift. And what that's going to do is it's going to unlock all of the features in Locals. You're going to be able to chat and comment on posts. You're going to be able to access our community Zoom calls that we do twice a week. You're going to get into book club. You're going to get into debate club. You're going to get into Stitch and Bitch. And coming up, starting this month, we're going to start bringing some special guests into my locals that are just going to do private Zoom calls with my local supporters. We've got Eliza Blue coming up on October 12th. She's going to join one of our community Zoom calls to have a nice private little chat with my local supporters. And then at the end of the month on October 28th, we're going to have the voice of reason, Benjamin Boyce himself. So you guys are going to get to connect with them one-on-one when no one else is watching, be able to ask your questions directly. I'm really excited to start doing these calls and locals. I think it's going to be great. So make sure you join us at kb.locals.com to get in on all of that. All right, let's start off. And this week I want to start off with something that's not, frankly, really news, but something that I think is actually really important. So you guys know we're coming into a really scary time in the world when a lot of people are going to be forced out of their jobs. And they're forced out of their jobs because they don't want to give in to vaccine mandates. They all have their personal reasons for it. For some, it's a medical decision. For some, it's they don't like being told what to do and being forced into making decisions against their will. But because a lot of people are being forced into out of their jobs in the next several weeks, I wanted to just make brief mention of this because, to be frank, there are a lot of lies being told by a lot of employers and a lot of people who may be well-meaning but are not giving out good advice right now. Now, for those of you who don't know, my background is I am an organizational psychologist. I have worked with human resources departments all over the place for years. I know more than I reasonably should about employment law and about how to navigate different types of situations. And I wanted to bring up this post because this was a conversation I had with an HR pro in California last week when I was talking about some of this stuff on Twitter, saying things like, if you are in a position where your employer is mandating that you get the vaccine, do not quit. Do not quit. You have to wait for them to fire you. Now, no one likes getting fired. I understand that, but it is actually the very best thing for you in this particular circumstance. And we're going to use this to explain why. Now, the advice I was getting here was specific to the state of California because the state of California actually has really wacky employment laws. The state of California has laws that very much heavily favor the employee. So the laws in California are not going to specifically apply everywhere, but this advice is actually generally good advice, even if you don't live in the state of California. And I'm going to explain why. So this person said, for anyone in California, and this is from an HR pro in the state of California, for anyone in California, my advice is to wait for the company to let you go. They are required by law to give you a reason in writing. To avoid any potential suits, they will likely cite at will or lack of work, in which case you would qualify for unemployment. Also in California, companies cannot make employees prove they are vaccinated through a vaccination card, etc. They just have to attest to being vaccinated. So there's that. Now, I think that's really good advice for people in California, but I also want to explain why this is really good advice generally across the board. So, almost every single employee out there is actually an employee at will. The employment at will covers almost everyone. Employment at will is essentially it's a law that says you are employed at the will of the employer. They can fire you at any time for any reason or for no reason at all. Now, it also helps the employee because it also means as an employee, you can quit at any time for any reason or for no reason at all. Now, pre-pandemic and craziness, this is actually a really good thing, right? A lot of employees think that they are obligated to give 2 weeks notice. You are never obligated to give 2 weeks notice. You might have to give 2 weeks notice in order to get your vacation payout. That's a different discussion, but you are never obligated to give 2 weeks notice. In fact, most of the time when I'm advising employees when they're thinking of quitting their jobs, I advise them to give zero notice because what can happen in between when you give your notice and when you actually leave, your employer can start to screw with you. I've seen employers basically backdoor employees who have already given notice to find reason to fire them to withhold certain benefits. So I always recommend that employees, when they're quitting, they do not give 2 weeks notice. They just leave that day. But in regards to the vaccine mandate specifically, at will employment is important because what this person is saying here is that in order to avoid potential lawsuits, employers who are firing employees are probably going to list at will employment or lack of work as the reason for them being fired. And I'm going to bet that this is not just true in the state of California. I'm going to bet that this is actually true in a lot of different places because I think a lot of employers know there are going to be lawsuits about this. There's 100% going to be lawsuits about this. And so a smart employer, when they're letting go of employees in regards to vaccine mandates, a smart employer is going to list at will employment as the reason that they're letting people go. Now, why is this important? Because a lot of people have been making these big declarations that if you get fired because of the vaccine mandate, you're not going to be able to collect unemployment. Well, guess what? If your employer lists at will employment as the reason they are letting you go, you will absolutely be able to collect unemployment. And this is why I'm sorry, people who are giving out advice in this area when they do not work in this area, when they're just hearing something on the news and they're getting a little bit bombastic about it, people need to stop. They need to stop. Or if you're in a position where you might be fired from your job because of the vaccine mandates, you need to listen to people who are giving you advice like this HR pro is, because this is actually really good advice. Just because it might be technically because of the vaccine mandate does not mean that that is what your employer is going to list as the cause of your termination. Make sure you document everything in writing because they very well could choose to say, well, this is just at will employment. That's why we're letting you go. They don't even have to give you a reason. So make sure you get every single thing documented in writing about why they are letting you go, what the cause of it is. You have to make them say it. Smart employers are going to list at will employment because that is going to dramatically reduce the chance that they're going to have their asses sued after the fact, especially when the lawsuits start, because the lawsuits will absolutely start at some point. So, if you are in this position, I'm so sorry that you're in this position. It sucks. I think we have all, as a collective society, failed you if you are now in a position of losing your job over this goddamn stupid vaccine mandate nonsense. But you have to play this smart. No one can force you to play it smart if you don't want to. And my strong recommendation is that you make them fire you and you make sure you get documentation about the reason they are firing you. Demand it of them and just see what happens. Listen, worst case scenario, you live in a state of like a state like New York, and they flat out say on your termination that it's because of the vaccine mandate, and then you're probably going to have a problem collecting unemployment. But guess what? You aren't going to get that unemployment if you quit anyway. And if you quit, you're cutting yourself off from that possibility entirely. But if you make them fire you and you make them document the reason that they fired you, and they say it's something like at will employment, or they say it's because of a lack of work, then you're going to be able to collect unemployment, and at least you're going to have that little safety net. I know it's not a guarantee. I know this is a sucky situation, but you have to make the most of what you have. And I really, really wish people who do not understand how to navigate this would frankly stop giving people horrible advice. Okay. Patricia says you can't get unemployment unless you're fired. That is absolutely, well, yeah, that's pretty much right. That's pretty much right. But in this case, we also want to make sure we're documenting the reason for the firing, which we're going to cross our fingers and hope was at will employment. So I just wanted to start with that because I think it's a really important thing that people need to know. And I thought that this was really smart advice. Moving forward, let's talk about Fauci. Let's talk about Fauci, because do you guys remember when, I actually have to switch into a different browser for this so we can hear sound. Do you guys remember when Joe Biden was like, maybe if everyone is a good little boy and girl, maybe they can celebrate the 4th of July and maybe they can have a barbecue. Well, Fauci is now saying that he's not even sure if we're going to be able to celebrate Christmas. Let's listen.
But we can gather for Christmas, or it's just too soon to tell?
You know, Margaret, it's just too soon to tell. We've just got to concentrating on continuing to get those numbers down and not try to jump ahead by weeks or months and say what we're going to do at a particular time.
But we.
So, according to Fauci, we might not even be able to celebrate Christmas. Guys, let me know in the chat how you would feel about Anthony Fauci telling you that you're not allowed to celebrate a holiday with your family. But we know how Senator Dianne Feinstein feels. Dianne Feinstein wants to make it harder to travel in the United States, particularly around the holidays. Let's read. Bill would require vaccines for domestic travel. Vaccines could soon be the ticket to traveling in the United States. Senator Dianne Feinstein has proposed legislation that would require travelers taking domestic flights to present proof of vaccination or a negative COVID test. Now, just for our YouTube overlords over here, I am not making any claims about the effectiveness of the vaccine. I think that people should listen to the CDC because, as YouTube would like us to know, the CDC is our god when it comes to vaccine information. We never question the infallible CDC. We simply bend down and worship at the feet of the CDC because everything the CDC says is right, and that's where we should get our information for all vaccine-related information. What I'm talking about here is a bill, okay? I'm talking about a bill that would impact domestic travel. Under the U.S. Travel Public Safety Act, the Secretary of Health and Human Services and the Federal Aviation Administration would be required to develop national vaccination standards and procedures for air travel. It would require the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention Advisory Committee on immunization processes to make recommendations for COVID-19 vaccine use in healthcare settings among healthcare personnel and other settings. We know that air travel during the 2020, I think this meant 2021. Oh, no, 2020, last year. We know that air travel during the 2020 holiday season contributed to last winter's devastating COVID-19 surge. We simply cannot allow that to happen again. It's as if people can't make their own decisions about why they might want to get on an airplane or where they might want to go. Has anyone ever had a gun held to their head and was like forced to get on an airplane? No. So if you are making a decision to get on an airplane instead of driving or taking another mode of transportation, that seems to be a personal choice to me. You don't have to fly if you don't want to. Ensuring that air travel protects themselves and their destination communities from this disease is critical to preventing the next surge, particularly if we confront new, more virulent variants of COVID-19, she said, similar to the requirements already in place for foreign travel. It only makes sense that we ensure the millions of airline passengers that crisscross our country aren't contributing to further transmission, especially as young children remain ineligible to be vaccinated. Now, some people, like the CDC, Some people like the CDC say that vaccination prevents transmission. We seem to have had some other cases where vaccination has not prevented transmission, like breakthrough cases. Now, of course, we need to listen to the CDC, and the CDC tells us that vaccination prevents transmission. So we got to go with that for YouTube right now. But that doesn't negate that there seems to be some vaccinated people that are both getting and spreading the virus. But the CDC tells us that it's vaccination's the way to go. So we should go with that. One of the challenges might be that you need to include religious exemptions for those who are opposed to a COVID-19 vaccine. I don't think that will fly, and here's why. It has a general exception. People can provide a negative test instead. So people with religious objections to vaccination can instead go and get a negative PCR test. There's already an exemption built in. Well, you know the problem with that is? So I went over to a friend's house for dinner the other day, and she was talking about how she actually knows. No, it was even better. We were in a knitting group. It wasn't dinner. We were in a knitting group, and she was talking about how she wanted to get a whole bunch of PCR tests just to have them around the house to do them in case they needed to travel or go abroad or some such thing. And she said, "Carlin, everywhere is sold out of them." Everywhere is sold. Do you guys have this experience in your community? Have you guys tried to buy a PCR test lately? Because apparently they're like not even available because every place is sold out and the companies making them are completely backlogged. So it seems to me this might be a little bit of a problem for people who are trying to travel. One traveler at San Francisco International Airport told the station that vaccine mandates would make her feel safer. Well, if an anonymous traveler in San Francisco says that vaccines would make her feel safer, then we just better get on board. Now you're packed right next to someone. I don't want to drink on the plane. I don't want to eat on the plane. I'm not taking my mask off. I would feel much more comfortable knowing someone else is vaccinated, said Megan Barton, a nurse practitioner. It's just science. Let's go with the science, people. Trust the science. And at least one state, Hawaii, requires vaccines or a negative test for domestic airline travelers. American Airlines has an app for people traveling to Hawaii or internationally to upload the necessary documents. Okay, guys, fun fact. If you're traveling, especially out of like Los Angeles, it is taking an insane amount of time to process all of this paperwork. So if you are checking a bag and you're flying somewhere, I recommend you get to the airport like extra early, unless you're in like a really small airport where things go quick. But like every single time I have flown out of LAX recently, it has been an absolute effing nightmare to check a bag, and I almost missed my flight one time, even though I'm kind of anal about things and I get to the airport really early. Like, be careful if you're actually traveling. Make sure you add lots of extra time because all this extra documentation is really clogging things up. And of course, we know at least one airline just fired a whole bunch of people, so probably going to make it even worse. The airline also said last month it would not provide special leave to unvaccinated employees who have to quarantine due to COVID-19, but it'll provide that same leave to vaccinated employees. How interesting. JetBlue is highly encouraging crew members to get vaccinated for COVID-19, the airline says. The airline pays up to an additional 14 days sick time for any crew member diagnosed with COVID-19. United Airlines was the first U.S. carrier to require vaccination for all domestic employees. This week, the company announced nearly 600 employees were being separated from the company for not complying. Delta is also requiring employees to get vaccinated, and last week said 82% had done so. Starting September 12th, any employee who had not gotten vaccinated was required to take a COVID test each week. So we'll see. We'll see. I strongly doubt that something like this is going to pass, but yeah, we knew they were going to try. I did hear a rumor, and I do think it's a rumor. Someone on Twitter was spreading around that Biden was going to sign an executive order like mandating this stuff. I don't think that's true, but I saw that spreading around Twitter like wildfire. So I don't believe that that's happening, at least not yet. And I don't actually think a bill like this has much chance of passing. But who knows? I've been wrong about the crazy lengths that these people will go to before. So who knows what they will do. But of course, school boards are the other issue that we're dealing with right now. And this is probably one of the most infuriating stories of all last week. School boards ask Biden to review threats and violence as possible domestic terrorism. I can't. A group representing local school boards says the federal government should review violence and threats involving schools to see if they violate federal statutes about domestic terrorism and hate crimes amid ongoing tensions and anger about COVID-19 policies. Now, of course, what's going on with school boards is school boards are getting inundated with really pissed off parents right now, right? Parents are pissed off about critical race theory and other woke nonsense being taught in the classroom. Parents are pissed off about vaccinations. Parents are pissed off about mask mandates. And the school board are the targets of their fury for better or worse. Now, in most cases, and I had a conversation with Deb Philman about this about a week ago, in most cases, when it comes to curriculum, not when it comes to vaccinations and masks, that's separate. But when it comes to curriculum, so like critical race theory, woke nonsense, unless you live in Connecticut and Vermont, school boards actually don't have say over that. So that might be misplaced anger for those types of related issues. But of course, for mask mandates, vaccinations, that's a whole different thing. In a Wednesday letter to President Joe Biden, the National School Boards Association said statutes like the Gun-Free School Zones Act and the USA Patriot Act, a law passed shortly after September 11, 2001 attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon designed to halt terrorism, should be enforced, if necessary, against crimes and acts of violence targeting K through 12 school officials. Let's just take a look at the actual letter that was sent. This is a long letter, so I don't know that we're going to read all of it, but let's take a look at some of it at least. Dear Mr. President, America's public schools and its education leaders are under an immediate threat. The National School Boards Association respectfully asks for federal law enforcement and other assistance to deal with the growing number of threats of violence and acts of intimidation occurring across the nation. Local school board members want to hear from their communities on important issues, and that must be at the forefront of good school board governance and promotion of free speech. They don't give a flying fuck about that. However, there must also be safeguards in place to protect public schools and dedicated education leaders as they do their job. Now, just a reminder, anytime that we are talking about public schools, we really should be calling them government schools. They're government schools. They're government-run institutions that the government compels your children to attend. These are state-funded apparatus. Okay? Let's just keep that in mind as we make our way through this letter. NSBA believes immediate assistance is required to protect our students, school board members, and educators who are susceptible to acts of violence affecting interstate commerce because of threats to their district, families, and personal safety. As our school board continues coronavirus recovery operations within their respective districts, they are also persevering against other challenges that would impede this progress in a number of communities. Coupled with attacks against school board members and educators for approving policies for masks to protect health and safety of students and school employees, many public school officials are facing physical threats because of propaganda purported the false inclusion of critical race theory within classroom instruction and curriculum. The false inclusion of critical race theory. Oh, okay. This propaganda continues despite the fact that critical race theory is not taught in public schools and remains a complex law school and graduate school subject well beyond the scope of a K through 12 class. Oh, so the National Association of School Boards is taking the position that has been debunked on numerous occasions, including on this very channel itself, that critical race theory just isn't taught in public schools. It's a bold position indeed, when in fact we know Kimberly Crenshaw, one of the inventors of critical race theory. I mean, there are many people who've written about it, but Kimberly Crenshaw is one. Kimberly Crenshaw herself a couple months ago, held Critical Race Theory Summer School, in which they had a whole track outlining how critical race theory can be used in public schools. We covered that on this channel. It was blatantly obvious. It literally said in the program of the event. So I'm not sure how they're continuing to, with a straight face, claim that critical race theory is not being taught in public schools. But I digress. Let's continue. On behalf of our state associations and the more than 90,000 school board members who govern our country's 14,000 local public school districts educating more than 50 million school children, NSBA appreciates your leadership to end the proliferation of COVID-19 in our communities and our school districts. Can you just picture them looking up to Biden, admiring, and with an admiring gaze? Oh, Joe Biden, you're just so great. You're just so great. Your work is just so great and beautiful. We also appreciate recent discussions with White House and U.S. Department of Education staff on many critical issues facing public schools, including threats school officials are receiving. In addition, we applaud your actions to restore resources to school districts that have not yet received their educator stabilization funding through the Project Safe, blah, 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 blah. For the record, there used to be a website that Betsy DeVos's Department of Education built that tracked exactly how much of this funding schools had actually spent, and it typically was in the area of 30%. So one should probably ask why schools, why public government-run schools are not actually spending the COVID relief money that they were given. I think that's a fair question. Maybe all of you should ask your public school that your kids are attending how much of their COVID money has actually been spent on COVID relief. I think that would be an interesting pursuit. While local and state law enforcement agencies are working with public school officials in several communities to prevent further disruptions to educational services and school district operation, law enforcement officials in some jurisdictions need assistance, including help with monitoring the threat level. As these threats and acts of violence become more prevalent, apparently they perceive words or violence in the course of this letter. During public school board meetings via documented threats transmitted via the U.S. Postal Service through social media and other online platforms and around school personal properties, NSBA respectfully asks that a joint collaboration among law enforcement agencies, state and local law enforcement, and with public school officials be undertaken to focus on these threats. NSBA specifically solicits the expertise and resources of the U.S. Department of Justice, Federal Bureau of Investigation. By the way, the FBI just subpoenaed Proton Mail for like 200,000 access to 200,000 email accounts. Nothing good can come from that. U.S. Department of Homeland Security, U.S. Secret Service, and its National Threat Assessment Center regarding the level of risk to public school children, educators, board members, and facilities and campuses. We also request the assistance of the U.S. Postal Inspection Service to intervene against threatening letters and cyberbullying attacks. How do you think they define cyberbullying and threatening letters? I'd love to see some guesses in the chat about how they're defining cyberbullying that have been transmitted to schools, school board members, district administrators, and other educators. Okay, so side note, I know I have a lot of my members of my locals community watching, and I'm thinking of starting a channel in our community Discord where we can like make it a special project to go and just document the social media of teachers. And just like you focus on your communities and the schools in your areas, like look at the social media of the teachers and document what's being posted on there. I think that would be fascinating. Let me know if that's something you'd like to do, and we'll make that happen in our Discord. As the acts of malice, violence, and threats against public school officials have increased, the classification of these heinous crimes could be equivalent to a form of domestic terrorism and hate crimes. As such, NSBA requests a joint expedited review by the U.S. Department of Justice, Education, and Homeland Security, along with appropriate training, coordination, investigations, and enforcement mechanisms from the FBI, including technical assistance necessary from and state and local coordination with its national security branch and counterterrorism division. This is insane. This letter is even more insane than I anticipated. Let's see, hang on. And enforcement mechanisms from the FBI, including any technical assistance from state and local coordination with its National Security Branch, Counterterrorism Division, as well as other federal agencies with relevant jurisdictional authority and oversight. Additionally, NSBA requests that such review examine appropriate enforceable actions against the crimes and acts of violence under the Gun-Free School Zones Act, the Patriot Act in regards to domestic terrorism, the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Acts, the Violence, Interference, and Federally Protected Rights Statute, the Conspiracy Against Rights Statute, and Executive Order to enforce all applicable federal laws for the preclusion of further threats and violence against students and educators, protection of students and public school board personnel, and any related measure. As the threats grow and news of extremist hate organizations shows up at school board meetings as being reported, this is a critical time for a proactive approach to deal with this very difficult issue. These threats or actual acts of violence against our school district are impacting the delivery of educational services to students and families, as many districts receive federal funds and subsidies for services to millions of students with disabilities, health screenings, and supplemental supports for disadvantaged students, child nutrition, blah, 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 blah. School board meetings have been disrupted in California, Florida, Georgia, and other states because of local directives for mask coverings to prevent students and educators from COVID-19. An individual arrest was made in Illinois for aggravated battery and disorderly conduct during a school board meeting. During two separate school board meetings in Michigan, an individual yelled a Nazi salute in protest to masking requirements. And of course, they have no idea why. They have no idea why. This individual was not advocating for the Nazis. This individual was calling the school board Nazis. My God. And other individuals prompted the school board to call a recess because of opposition to critical race theory. Well, I do remember the school board in Notamas who said that they were taking a break and then just left the building because there were so many pissed off parents. In New Jersey, Ohio, and other states, anti-mask proponents are inciting chaos during board meetings. In Virginia, an individual was arrested, another man was ticketed for trespassing, and a third person was hurt during a school board meeting discussion distinguishing current curriculum from critical race theory and regarding equity issues. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, the letter just keeps going, but you guys get the idea. Like, this is an insane letter. This is an insane letter. They're literally calling angry parents at school board meetings domestic terrorists and asking for Joe Biden to intervene to investigate them as domestic terrorists. Shmoony, thank you for the super chat. I live in New South Wales, Australia. Oh, I'm sorry, dude. I'm sorry. I got the first dose just so I could get a haircut and go to the gym before the 1st of December. I've been in lockdown since late June. I recently had a 25th birthday under a 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. curfew. Well, guys, let's all send love to Shmoony in the chat. I am so sorry. What's going on in Australia is disturbing at the highest level. Just hang in there. It's going to get better. It's going to get better. I mean, especially for you guys. Just hang in there, dude. You're going to be okay. Let's see. I saw another super chat. Speculator says, Carlin, is there a way you could give a quick how-to for your locals members who are techno challenged? I'm old. Yeah, we'll talk about that in locals. I assume you're talking about for the Discord. We'll make that happen. Don't you worry about that. But there is a response. There's at least one response, and this comes from Parents Defending Education and a whole bunch of other groups. And this is a little hard to read, so I'm going to do my best. This is addressed to the National School Board Association Dear Mrs. Garcia and Mr. Slavin, on behalf of the 427,000 members, the undersigned organizations write in response to your September 29th letter to President Biden requesting federal assistance to stop threats and acts of violence against school board members, school officials, and teachers. In that letter, you requested that the federal government investigate, intercept, and prevent current threats and acts of violence against our public school officials through existing statutes, executive authority, interagency, and blah, 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 blah. We just read that. NSBA cites a tiny number of minor incidents in order to insinuate that parents who are criticizing and protesting the decisions of school boards are engaging in or may be engaging in domestic terrorism and hate crimes. NSBA even invokes the Patriot Act, the association of legitimate protest within terrorism and violence reveals both your contempt for parents and your unwillingness to understand and hear the sincere cries of parents on behalf of their children. To equate parents with terrorists dishonors the thousands of victims of actual terrorism around the world. Have you no shame? Your letter to President Biden is a thinly veiled threat intended to intimidate into silence and submission the very constituents that your members ostensibly represent. Our organizations unequivocally oppose violence and find it deeply troubling that you imply otherwise about concerned citizens who deeply care about their community's children and who are concerned by the direction that American schools have taken. Citizens are angry that school boards and school officials around the country are restricting access to public meetings, limiting public comment, and in some cases, conducting business via text message in violation of state open meeting laws. They are angry that schools are charging them thousands of dollars in public records requests to view curriculum and training material that impact their children and that should be open to the public by default. They are angry that pandemic-related learning losses have compounded the already low reading, writing, and math proficiency rates in America's schools. They are angry that rather than focusing on the decline of student achievement, large numbers of districts have chosen to fund, often with hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxpayer money, social justice and diversity, equity, and inclusion programs with finite resources. Your members refuse to listen to those concerns, and your association has chosen to smear their constituents rather than engage them in good faith. It is appalling that you would choose to threaten your fellow Americans for having the courage to hold you accountable for your failures. We will not be bullied. We will not have our speech chilled. We have a constitutional right to petition our elected officials and will continue to do so. And we ask that your organization and your members engage respectfully, constructively with the country's parents, grandparents, and concerned citizens so that we might work together to address and improve the quality of America's public education systems for all children. And it was signed by a bunch of different groups, including Parents Defending Education, Moms for Liberty, Moms for America, No Left Turn in Education, all sorts of different groups. Really great letter. I think this response is exactly the righteous indignation that these people deserve. Nick H. says teachers unions, BLM, burning down buildings is free speech and equity parents using free speech and voicing concerns are labeled domestic terrorists. Well, indeed. Well, indeed. Yeah, Moms for Liberty is a great group. I'm starting to get involved. I'm going to be getting involved with the Moms for Liberty chapter near me. I've already been talking to them. I'm pretty excited about it. I think they're doing really great work. Definitely look up your Moms for Liberty chapter in your area. But you know what the other thing is? Never, ever, 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 ever underestimate the ability of conservatives to shoot themselves in the foot. Conservative Koch networks disavows critical race theory bans. Now, you all know that I was strongly lobbying for the anti-CRT bill in my state of New Hampshire. And in that anti-CRT bill, it flatly said, on page 4, it was only a 4-page bill, there was in a general provision section, it flatly said in the bill that you could teach anything in the bill as long as you taught it from an objective perspective. It said it in the bill. And yet all of these people keep coming out and they're like, these critical race theory bans are inhibiting free speech. No, they're not. No, they're not. I don't know how many times I have to say this. It started to drive me a little crazy if I'm honest. But the anti-CRT bills are in the vast majority of cases are stipulating within the bill that you can teach the divisive concepts as long as you're teaching them from an objective perspective and you're not becoming a little activist in your classroom. And P.S., these bills limit the power of state. They are limiting the power of the state. They are not limiting free speech. They are limiting the power of the state because public school teachers do not have free speech protections when they are teaching in the classroom. They can't teach whatever they like. Their speech is already limited. This has already been decided by the Supreme Court. It is limiting the power of the state. Now, public school teachers have the right to free speech outside of the classroom. They can teach whatever the flip they want, but they can't teach it in the classroom. They have to follow the law. Let's read. This is from the AP. As conservative political groups mobilize to ban in schools what they call critical race theory, because again, these people seem to think that we don't understand what critical race theory is, one prominent backer of Republican causes and candidates is notably absent. Leaders in the network built by billionaire Koch family say they're opposed to government bans over teaching critical race theory and history, over teaching about race and history in school. That's not what they ban. That's not what they ban. It just never ceases to amaze me how these people, they don't even read the bills they're against. They don't even effing read them. Chloe Valdary is guilty of this too. Chloe Valdary, who everyone loves because of her theory of enchantment, hasn't even read the bills and she's railing against them on Twitter. It drives me absolutely insane. These bills are not that long. Using government to ban ideas, even those we disagree with, is counter to core American principles, the principles that help drive progress, said Evan Feinberg, executive director of the Koch-affiliated Stand Together Foundation. This position is in line with the country's long-held libertarian streak, but it has sparked fresh charges of hypocrisy from the mega donors' critics. After spending years pouring money into conservative groups, the Koch groups cannot distance themselves from the movement and blah, blah, blah. They have this nice position they want to tout from a PR standpoint, but their money has gone to these groups. The Koch organization first went public with its position last spring as state lawmakers and conservative groups began passing legislation that bans classroom-specific concepts, including the idea that racism is systemic in society and the legal system. There is no evidence of this. Why are we teaching it in school when there is no evidence of this? In a letter published in the Chronicle of Higher Education in May, Charlie Rugger from the Charles Koch Foundation's Vice President of Philanthropy described Republicans' push to ban these concepts from schools as a gag on free expression. Well, Charlie has obviously not read the bills he's talking about. Both learning and research require openness to new ideas and the ability to argue productively. I'm sorry. What high schooler is doing research? From a scholarly perspective. Did any of you guys do scholarly research in high school? I know I sure as shit didn't. I didn't do it until I got into graduate school. So they're fundamentally not talking about the same thing. The organization's opposition to race and education bans has not kept the groups it has long supported out of the fight. While good, in Wisconsin, parents seeking to recall school board members have received help from the Koch-supported Wisconsin Institute for Liberty and Law. So basically, they don't even know their own policies. Doesn't this article too, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but doesn't this article, this is from the AP. Doesn't this reek of an op-ed? This is not journalism. This is an op-ed. God, can I just... My kingdom for actual journalism. My kingdom for actual journalism on both sides of the aisle. I'm getting so fed up with organizations on both sides of the aisle. You know, people ask me sometimes, they're like, Carlin, where do you get your news from? And oftentimes, like, they're assuming that I get it from, like, Fox News or Newsmax or things like that, and I'm just like, I only look at primary sources. I only look at primary sources because people on both sides of the aisle suck. All journalists today suck. Journalism is officially dead. This is from the flipping AP, and it reads more like an op-ed than it does an actual article. I just wanted an article telling me what was going on. I didn't want an opinion AP. God. They have this whole section. They're like, the Koch brothers are all hypocrites. Like, this is not reporting. This is editorializing at best. So let's move on. Let's move on. Let's talk about Keith Olbermann, shall we? Did anyone see this crazy Keith Olbermann video? Okay, check this out. I have to change my browser. I have to change it so we can hear the sound. Because if you haven't seen this crazy Keith Olbermann video, we're just gonna, it's 2 minutes long. Let's just watch it. Oh wait, he's talking. Hang on.
Mission
Starting over.
time to stop coddling the people who won't get the shot. Booster shot. Mission accomplished. And it is time to stop coddling them, the ones who won't get the damn shot already. And our first step, you and I, is symbols, the language we use. We call these people vaccine hesitant, vaccine skeptics, anti-vax. We say they're protesting mandates and passports. They're making a personal choice. They're waiting for more information. They're making a medical decision. Bullshit. They're afraid. They're afraid to get vaccinated.
All right, let's just pause right here. Let's just pause right here. Keith Olbermann is doing this video from his balcony overlooking Central Park. Have you ever seen a more privileged white man in your life than Keith Olbermann screaming about how people that are so far beneath him are just afraid? We're just afraid from a balcony overlooking Central Park. This guy, the reason I'm so pissed about this is honestly, like, Keith Olbermann, like, with his special comments back in the day. I used to love Keith Olbermann. I know I was a liberal. I'm sorry. We already know that. I used to be a Democrat. I was a Democrat for 20 years. But, like, Keith Olbermann's special comments back in the day were awesome. Not all the time, but sometimes he was, like, really dead on. Now he has lost the damn plot. This is crazy. Talk about the definition of privilege. This guy has probably been hiding out in his Central Park apartment for like the last year and a half. And he dares to lecture everyday people about being afraid while he looks like a crazy person that is like obviously has panic in his eyes. Like, watch his eyes throughout this video. Let's continue.
Stop feeding their egos about what they're doing. Stop legitimizing it. Vaccine hesitant, they're afraid.
I'm not remotely afraid, Keith. I'm not the one that's been hiding out in my house for the past 2 years. I've been traveling almost constantly while you've been sitting on your balcony overlooking Central Park.
Vaccine skeptics, they're afraid. Anti-vax, they're afraid. They're protesting mandates and passports.
Look at him. He has turned his own hair white. His hair is entirely his fault.
They're afraid. They're making a personal choice. They're afraid. They're waiting for more information. Afraid.
Like, why does he seem to think that screaming they're afraid is actually going to make any difference? Has your mind ever been changed by someone getting right in your face and saying, you're afraid, you're afraid, you're afraid? Has that ever changed your mind about anything? No. He does. Jen says he does sound deranged. This is like one of the most unhinged videos I've ever seen in my life.
They're making a medical decision to be afraid.
Like, you guys are literally getting vaccinated against a virus that has a 99% survival rate. And of course, we want to pay attention to the CDC because the CDC assures us that the vaccination is totally safe and awesome and totally prevents the vaccine. But, like, don't scream to me about fear when you're getting vaccinated against a virus that has a 99% survival rate and are living your life afraid of the people who are not vaccinated.
Snowflakes are afraid of the vaccine, afraid of being proved wrong.
I'm actually not afraid of the vaccine at all. I think that if I did get vaccinated, I'd probably be fine. I might still get vaccinated. I don't know. We'll see. If they do this thing where you have to be vaccinated to travel, I'm probably going to bite the bullet. I'm not remotely afraid. I just don't think it's necessary. You, of course, should contact your doctor and consult with the CDC and not listen to a word of my advice. I'm just not afraid of the virus. I'm not afraid of the vaccine. I'm not afraid of the virus. You should do whatever you want in consultation with the CDC God and the YouTube overlords.
Wrong. Afraid of doing what anybody else in the world tells them to do. Afraid of needles. So no more pleasant euphemisms about what's going on here, apart from the people who have legitimate medical complications about.
I mean, I do have to give him credit for actually acknowledging that there are people with legitimate medical complications. That's at least a step in the right direction, I suppose.
Vaccines. We have to stop coddling the morons who will not get the shot. We start by calling them what they are. They are all snowflakes and cowards and idiots.
This is from the kind, empathetic left that just wants you to live a long and glorious life. That's all they really want for you. They just want you to live your life and be happy and survive, because they're the kind, empathetic ones.
And losers. And most importantly, they are afraid.
Yes, that is definitely the face of someone who is just completely unafraid. Nick H says, so why did he get the vaccine? Does he fear death? I mean, I don't know why you get a vaccine for something unless you're afraid of it on some level. Not that I think that we should be afraid of the vaccine. I don't think we should be afraid of the virus either. I think you should consult with the CDC. The CDC wants you to get the vaccine. The CDC assures you that the vaccines are completely fine. And YouTube assures me that I will get banned unless I say that 15 times in every single live stream I do. So what do you guys think of Olbermann? Are we the afraid ones? Or is Olbermann the afraid one? I will let you guys make that choice for yourself as we move on to our next story. And the next story, I'm going to be honest, this one pissed me off quite a little bit. Pissed me off. This is from LGBTQ Nation. Brandon Straka told his hundreds of thousands of followers to storm the Capitol to start a revolution. He's getting off with a slap on the wrist. Let's just start right off the bat. That is fake news. That did not happen. It did not happen. LGBTQ Nation is lying, and I hope sincerely that Brandon sues them for every penny they have for slander and for defamation, because this is a blatant lie. Blatant lie. Jenny's getting inky with it, says you don't think snowflake means what he thinks it means. Yeah, the left likes to change definitions of things, don't they? Shannon says it's easy to dismiss the other side of an argument if you don't know about their arguments, and censorship helps ensure people don't find out. That is exactly right. So I wanted to read this article just to point out what complete and utter bullshit this article is. Let's take a look. Gay hairdresser will plead guilty to Capitol insurrection charge. Now, I'm not going to speak for Brandon in the course of this stream. Okay? I'm not speaking for Brandon. He is going to, at some point when he's ready, talk about why he's made the decision that he made. It is not my place to say. I simply want to talk about the absolute gross fake news that this website is reporting on him, because it's not true. David says, I'm more afraid of demented old goobers like Keith Olbermann. Me too. So they follow up with the subhead here. Brandon Straka told his hundreds of thousands of followers to storm the Capitol to start a revolution. He's getting off with a slap on the wrist. Brandon never said that. He never said that. And they even actually admit so much in the article. Let's take a look. A gay hairdresser has agreed to a plea deal for participating in the Capitol insurrection on January 6th. Don't you always love that they refer to Brandon as a hairdresser? As though that's all he did. It's not as though Brandon Straka built the walkaway movement from absolute nothing to have over 500,000 people in it on Facebook when Facebook summarily deleted the group for no reason at all. He's not just a hairdresser. What Brandon Straka has done is incredible, and Walkaway will be coming back. And part of the reason for it is this plea deal that is going to allow Brandon to actually talk in public again. If the judge accepts the deal, he'll have a maximum sentence of 6 months in prison, even though he said on social media that his intent was to incite a revolution like in 1776. He never said that. That is a blatant, bold-faced lie. Brandon Straka, 43, will appear in a federal court next Tuesday, October 6th, to enter his plea after he posted a video online of himself at the Capitol that day and multiple social media messages calling for more violence. That's not what the video said. And Brandon has never called for violence. I hope so. Brandon, if you don't sue these people, please sue the pants off these people. Straka is a hairdresser from New York who got some fame in 2018 for his walkaway organization that encouraged groups that usually vote for Democrats, like LGBTQ people, to walk away from the Democratic Party for Republicans. He claims he was once a Democrat. Brandon has shown multiple instances in his live streams of things he posted on social media when he was still a Democrat. He claims he was a Democrat. He absolutely was a Democrat. In the years since then, he has become more radical until he was slated to be a speaker at the Stop the Steal rally on January 5th in D.C., according to a rally permit from the Department of the Interior. The rally was to promote the lie that President Joe Biden stole millions of votes across several states to usurp the presidency of Donald Trump and somehow left no clear evidence of this massive undertaking. I'm not going to talk about that. The next day, Straka was tweeting to his 500,000 followers from the Capitol, "Patriots at the Capitol, hold the line." That does not call for violence. That does not call for insurrection. Later in the day, he said he was confused that major GOP leaders said they didn't support the crowd, which was carrying weapons and chanting, "Hang my..." Oh my God. Brandon probably didn't even see that. As they trashed the Capitol and lawmakers were taken to safety by law enforcement officers. "I'm completely confused," he tweeted. "For 4 to 6 weeks, everyone on the right has been saying 1776, that if Congress moves forward with ceremonially accepting each state's electoral votes, it will mean a revolution. So Congress moves forward, patriots storm the Capitol, now everyone is virtue signaling their embarrassment that this happened." None of that means he was calling for insurrection, dude. I spoke to Brandon that night. He didn't know what was going on besides what he saw, which was not that there was like people hanging nooses and stuff like that. It's so ridiculous. These people lie so seamlessly. He later deleted he didn't delete his social media accounts. He didn't. He made his Twitter account private. Facebook deleted his Facebook account. Brandon didn't delete anything, so far as I understand. And 2 days after the riot, Facebook deleted the page for Walkaway, saying it violated Facebook's policy against hateful, threatening, obscene content, which of course was untrue, because the only thing in the Walkaway group was testimonial videos. Multiple people also caught him on video, which the FBI obtained after videos were posted on YouTube to allegedly show him outside the Capitol building shouting, "We're going in and go, go." That wasn't Brandon's voice. The video that Brandon posted wasn't his voice shouting those things. Anyone who knows what Brandon's voice sounds like knows very, very clearly that it was not his voice. Those are not things that he would do. Another video allegedly shows Straka urging other rioters to attack Capitol Police officer and rip away his protective gear. According to the charging documents, Straka shouted, "Take it away from him." Other people in the crowd yelled, "Take the shield." Wasn't his voice. I traveled with Brandon Straka and the Walkaway team for 6 months in the back half of 2020, every single week in new cities, I would know Brandon's voice in a crowd. It was not his voice. He was later arrested in January on multiple charges that could have resulted in a 5-year jail sentence. WASU 9 reports that he accepted a plea deal with the Department of Justice that reduced the charges to 1 misdemeanor count of disorderly conduct in a Capitol building. In 2019, Brandon sued in New York's LGBT Community Center because they wouldn't let him hold a conservative event there. He accused the center of discriminating against him, presumably because he's gay, because he believed that the center would have allowed straight conservatives to hold an event there or something. That's actually not what happened at all. The judge dismissed his nonsensical lawsuit. 90 people have pled guilty so far to charges related to the Capitol insurrection. I just read this, honestly, because I really want Brandon to sue them. This is absurd. Even if, like, they took what he said completely out of context and said that he told his hundreds of thousands of followers to storm the Capitol. No, he did not. He said no such thing. And they're getting ratioed to high heaven on Twitter right now. Look at this. Look at this. Oh, Shamika Michelle. So which group of people are you seeking to demean as you describe Brandon? The gays or the hairdressers? Look at this. Guys, please ratio the living hell out of this Twitter account. Because I can't. I can't with these people. They lie with impunity. They get away with it all the time. So I hope that Brandon sues their asses. Damian Jarrett, who is from the Walkaway campaign, I had him on my channel last week. He's been talking about how he hopes that they're like going to sue. Fingers crossed, because this is absurd. But to wrap things up for this week, I've got a couple things that I think are a little bit more fun. First, I want to talk about Britney Spears, because I just think this is a badass move. I think this is awesome. Britney Spears poses for Naked Pics Day after her conservatorship victory. I think that this is a badass move by Britney Spears. Like, you guys might have feelings about it. You guys might have feelings about Britney Spears posing naked on her Instagram, okay? But I'm going to be honest. I think she is absolutely entitled to this moment. A recently freed Britney Spears posted nude photos online Thursday, a day after the judge suspended her father, Jamie Spears, from the conservatorship controlling her life. The pop star posted the images on Instagram with the caption, "Playing in the Pacific, never hurt anyone." This is not about being naked on the internet. This is a giant FU to her father. That's what this is about. This is about someone, and you can think what you want about her particular sanity. She is a 40-year-old woman that did not control her own finances. This is someone who had her life controlled from the time she was a little girl, had every aspect of her life controlled, and then was forced to be under the thumb of her father, who controlled all her money until she was 40 years old. And now finally she has her freedom to do what she wants. This is a giant fuck you to her father, and I'm living for it. I love it. This is her empowering. And yes, her body looks great. Like, good for her, man. Good for her. Spears is apparently on vacation celebrating the judge's ruling. Suspension is in the best interest of Britney Spears, Judge Brenda Penny said in his ruling. The current situation is not tenable. The order is effective today, right now. She's got all sorts of other pictures. I just think, like, there is no more empowering thing a person can do to, like, get back at their father than post nude pictures on the internet. I think it's great. 2 thumbs up. You go, Britney Spears. I have no issue at all with what you're doing. But the last thing I want to talk about today, guys, is I want to talk about who saw the Purge commercial for Florida. Did anyone see this? Who's a fan of the Purge movies in the chat? I love the Purge movies. I do. I actually think they're really well done. I like the first one the best. but like I think all of them are okay. But the first one's probably my favorite, just because like I love it. Okay, the Purge movie's been out long enough, so I think I can say this. I love it when the hero dies. I do. I love it when the hero dies. So I was not disappointed by this Purge ad from Clown World Today, which is honestly one of my favorite new Instagram accounts. It's at CWT_news, and they just report Clown World news. So I encourage you all to follow this account. But let's watch this Purge video from Remove Ron, dedicated to taking down Ron DeSantis in 2022.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of your cabin crew, we'd like to inform you that we have officially entered Florida airspace. Now that we're making our final descent, please watch this short message from Governor Ron DeSantis on COVID-19. Thereafter, everyone on board will be required to comply with the state's forever purge.
We are not doing any vaccine passports in the state of Florida. We trust people to make their own decisions in this state. We are not going to be bludgeoning people with restrictions and mandates and lockdowns or any of that stuff.
As Governor DeSantis stated, while you're within state lines, you do not have to wear a mask. You do not have to get a vaccine. It is against the law for private businesses or schools to mandate masks or vaccines. And you have the absolute right to infect whoever you want, whenever, and wherever with COVID-19. Thank you for traveling with us, and please enjoy your forever purge.
COVID-19 is surging again.
This is the time to double down.
The governor is doubling down. He says students shouldn't be forced to wear masks.
If you are trying to lock people down, I'm going to stand in your way.
Florida just requested 300 new ventilators.
Hospitals are filling up here.
There is evidence that children are making up much higher cases that are emerging.
The numbers continue to rise across Florida.
This fall, don't breathe in.
This is insane.
The Forever Purge. Coming to a theater and live streaming networks near you.
I mean, is it just me, or did that video make Ron DeSantis look like a total effing badass? Am I wrong to say that that video like made you want to go to Florida? It definitely made me want to go to Florida. And the reason I bring this up, guys, is that next week, sadly, on Sunday, Effed Up News will not be airing next Sunday because I actually am going to Florida next week. I'm going to Florida on Friday. I will be going to AmpFest. I will be at the Trump Doral on October 8th and 9th. I'll be leaving on October 10th. I'll be around in the morning, but I'll be leaving later in the day. So I actually am going to Florida next week. If you are going to be at AmpFest, I'm going to be on a panel with Chris Rufo and James Lindsay at I think 9:30 in the morning on Saturday, which totally like cramps my style in terms of like sleeping in, but I'm going to make the sacrifice to do it. So if you're going to be at AmpFest, let me know. I'll definitely see you there. But I'm really looking forward to going to Florida. I think that this commercial actually makes Ron DeSantis look like a badass, and it makes it's like they're clown versions of themselves. Why would anyone go to Florida that does not want to be in Florida? If you don't want to go to Florida, if you're scared of getting COVID, just stay home. Stay home. No one in Florida is going to care. So definitely let me know if you are going to be at AmpFest. I'm really looking forward to it. And guys, that's really all I have for this week. So as a reminder, if you want to support the work I do, please do so by heading over to kb.locals.com. You can go and provide support. You can join as a monthly member for $5 a month. You can join as an annual member for $50 a year, which gives you 2 months for free. You can make a one-time gift. We've got lots of exciting things coming up in Locals, like on October 12th. So coming up in a little over a week, we're going to have Eliza Blue come into our community Zoom call that's on Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern time. She's just going to hang out with my Locals community. They're going to get to ask her questions. This is exclusively for supporters on Locals, so you want to make sure you sign up for that. We're going to get to hear about her work with human trafficking, which I think is really inspirational. And then, of course, at the end of the month, we have the voice of reason himself, Benjamin Boyce, will be joining us on our Thursday stream, it takes place at noon Eastern time, which is just a Zoom call. that's open exclusively for my local supporters. So I hope I'll see you guys in locals. I hope I'll see some of you at AmpFest coming up this week. I'm really excited about it. That's all we've got for this time, guys. Take care. We'll see you soon.